Pleasure to be here at CII. We're actually in New Delhi and delivering this in the evening. I wanted to thank CII, Sumani Dash in DC, and Suchita Sonalika in London for setting this up, and I do appreciate it very, very much. We've enjoyed being with CII all day. We've called upon a number of important companies here in India. I thought as we went on today, I'd share some of the experiences, and Lori Blazek, our CEO, is here beside me, and she's going to pipe in appropriate ways, I am sure. What is your biggest challenge in growing your top line? What we've been hearing over the past week or two in working with CII is a couple things. Number one is the concept of commoditization. As you all know, business tends to commoditize both products and services, and one of the things that you want to do in your business is to differentiate yourself and to be unique, a value-added partner to your clients. And that's really what Topline Talent is all about, is forming strategic partnerships with important clients. We are also going to talk about training and retaining your top salespeople, because there's nothing more important than a high-level producer. As we go, and if you have a question, you can type it in. We'll be able to respond to it. But we'll go ahead and jump right into the seminar. I wanted to start off with the value of self-awareness. Self-awareness has received a lot of importance in the United States in terms of developing the concept of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence came about in the 1980s and the 1990s with Dan Goleman out of Harvard. When we began to look in the psychology profession, heretofore IQ was always associated with executive success and sales success, and we began to look more and more as a profession on what it took to be successful. And emotional intelligence is what we've really rallied around in terms of understanding what it takes to be successful. The idea of emotional intelligence starts with self-awareness. Self-awareness is the building block of emotional intelligence. Self-awareness is also used to better understand how you add strategic value to deals. So we are going to go deeply into what it means to add strategic value and how your personality and how your salespeople's personality is actually a positive tool to add strategic value to all deals. Because the last thing you want to do is be seen as a commodity. When you're seen as a commodity, all the client is interested in is low price. And that's not where you want to be in business. Self-awareness is also useful because you want to make sure your salespeople are great listeners. And the more self-aware you are, the more your ego doesn't need to be validated and recognized. And if your ego doesn't need to be validated and recognized, you become a much better listener. So self-awareness is the key in Module 1. Topline Talent has 3 core modules and an extra module for the sales leader.
And we'll talk about this later.
We're going to talk about that later, but let's get into personality theory. In the 1980s and the 1990s, some large-scale studies were being conducted on different personality types. And what the gold standard now is the Big Five. The Big Five really has emerged in the area of personality research as the most important concept in personality testing and in personality theory. So I'm going to go over the concept of the Big Five and how the Big Five can help your salespeople become value-added business partners. There are 5 core personality traits. I'm going to talk about the first one, is called open-minded. Now, the open-minded personality is one who is creative, imaginative, abstract, curious, deep thinkers. Bear in mind that all of us have each one of these traits embedded in our personality structure. But everybody on the webinar today has a different combination of how prevalent each of the traits is within our personality structure. So the open-minded personality is really like Steve Jobs and Khan. We looked at some of the people in India that were having quite a bit of press about them, and there's a actor by the name of Khan who's the #1 actor in India. And both Steve Jobs and Shah Rukh Khan are considered to be open-minded people because they are creative, they are imaginative. Now, each of the big five has what we call the shadow side of the personality. So if you have a strong personality trait, that is your strength. That is where your power is going to emerge from. That is how you're going to be successful in life. In the area of psychology, we've done a lot of work on success. And it turns out that the most successful people in life have not overcome their weaknesses. The most successful people in life have learned to leverage their strengths. Steve Jobs is an excellent example as somebody with great strength, but also a great shadow to his personality. So if you know your strength, you're going to know your shadow, and you're going to recognize yourself in some of these descriptions. The weakness of the open-minded personality is that they feel comfortable asking others to sacrifice their future, and believe me, they always paint their future in a very positive way. They love to talk in conceptual terms, but they ignore issues and problems their vision holds for other people. If you've ever dealt with an open-minded type, get him or her to sacrifice some in the present for you as well. So, and these traits, one trait is no better than the other. All of these traits have value. All of these traits have positivity, but each one of these traits does have a shadow. So as we go through, think about your own self and think about your strength, and then think about some of the weaknesses or the shadow that that trait embodies. The second trait, and again, these are in no particular order, the second trait is called the extrovert. And we're all familiar with the extrovert. The terminology of extraversion, introversion really came about from the great Swiss psychoanalyst Carl Jung, was the first to identify the difference between the extrovert and the introvert. The classic extrovert is a performer. They're energetic, enthusiastic, assertive, outgoing, and sociable. You can tell if you're an extrovert. If you go to a party and you become energized by meeting people at the party, and when you get back to your house or back to your condo, do you feel energized by all the encounters and the interaction? If you feel energized and you feel enlightened and you feel happy when you get back, you're an extrovert. If you get back from a party and you need some isolation, you're fatigued of meeting and greeting all the different people, you're probably more of an introvert. Now, interestingly enough, the extrovert versus the introvert are divided about 50-50 in the American population and in the Indian population. It's interesting that India and America both lean towards extraversion as a culture. The extrovert is outgoing and sociable, but the weakness is that they exist more in the present and they live in the moment. They can alter their mood easily and they act on their emotions, and they're active, not reflective. As a general statement, your sales team is going to be extroverted. Now, there are exceptions to that when the sales team are more scientific and they're selling more of a scientific product or service, and they have to have a scientific degree like a BS in chemistry or biology or something like that. But even then, salespeople do tend to be extroverted. Why? Because it's such a people-oriented profession. A lot of times we see introverts going into sales, but in the long run, they tend to want to get into sales management and sales leadership. And we'll talk about that at the end. But your sales team is going to be more extroverted. Some examples of an extrovert are one of our former presidents, Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was a prototypical extrovert. If you might recall, he always had members of Congress over at the White House. He always had a lot of interaction. One of the complaints about President Obama, for example, not to get overly political, is that he has a poor relationship with Congress, and some of it is just a condition of his introversion. By the end of the day, he's tired, and he wants to go up on the third floor of the White House and kick back and relax, whereas Bill Clinton used to invite people over. Obama has a tendency to be more isolated. And again, this is really a function of their extroversion versus their introversion. Another well-known example, perhaps too well-known now, is Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a classic extrovert as well. Again, if you're energized by a party, you're an extrovert. If you're fatigued by a party, you're probably more of an introvert. Let's look at the third personality structure. And again, one is not better than the other. Let's look at the agreeable personality. Agreeables are wonderful people. I happen to have a soft spot in my heart for the agreeable personality because they make such an effective partner. They demonstrate emotional intelligence, and they're concerned with cooperation and social harmony. The agreeable personality is very useful, for example, if you have a client manager that has to manage one big account and the client is tough and demanding with a lot of conflict. The agreeable personality is a wonderful account manager and account salesperson because they do such a great job in dealing with conflict. Now, some of the weaknesses of the agreeable personality, they tend to be non-political. They're very transparent. Sometimes they can be naive. And agreeableness is sometimes not useful in situations that require detachment in negotiations. So if you have a hardcore negotiation, you might have an agreeable and you might have somebody with a more metrically driven personality that has a harder edge to them. And I'm going to talk about them in just a second. But sometimes an agreeable matched with somebody else can make a very effective team, kind of good cop, bad cop, if you've heard of that description. Gandhi, the great leader of India, which really bent the arc of history, was inagreeable. And one of our most successful presidents, Ronald Reagan, was also inagreeable. So as you can see, each personality type, if it's matured and developed and strengthened, can make for an excellent leader. So oftentimes I get asked the question, well, what makes for an effective leader? Well, it really depends upon the situation, because each of these personality structures can make for very effective leaders. It just depends. And again, that's where self-awareness is so important as a leader, and self-awareness is so important as a salesperson, because if you know yourself and you know your strength, you're going to know how you add value to a situation. Reagan was well known, for example, for his ability to say the perfect joke at the perfect time and to reduce conflict. He was very, very good in team dynamics, and the agreeable personality is a very effective team player. And Gandhi obviously was a hugely effective agreeable in the sense that he got many, many people to cooperate. And the agreeable of all the 5 personality types has less of an ego. The agreeable partners more effectively because they do not project their ego into the interpersonal dynamic. Gandhi and Reagan are good examples of the agreeable personality. Let's look at the 4th trait, conscientiousness. Conscientious people are dependable, organized, hardworking, task-focused, and efficient. They go directly to the heart of the fire. If there is a tough set of tasks that need to be done, the conscientious personality is the type that goes right for the hard part. A lot of us will procrastinate when it comes around to tackling tough issues, not the conscientious personality. They go for it, they order and prioritize, and they get things done. If you want to get things done, get yourself a good conscientious personality. Now, the weakness of the conscientious structure is they insist upon being included, or they work against the deal. Interestingly enough, I have Hillary Clinton as an example, who's obviously running against what we think is going to be Donald Trump. So we have a conscientious structured presidential candidate against an extrovert. And one of the knocks against Hillary is she's inauthentic and she doesn't project herself well. Again, this is an aspect of the conscientious personality, because the conscientious personality on an unconscious level is always worried about making a mistake. Now, the extrovert is always worried about not being liked. So you have two different shadows operating in these personality structures. The weakness is they insist upon being included, and it's interesting if when you listen to Hillary Clinton reminisce about Barack Obama. She was Secretary of State and reported directly to Obama, obviously. Her biggest complaint about Obama, she wasn't included enough in discussions. So again, she was projecting perfectly the shadow side of the conscientious personality. They also tend towards caution, acting to preserve, and they can be inflexible. Now, when you really think about the conscientious personality, you think about somebody who bears down, who gets the work done, who focuses. A lot of times they can be narrow-minded, and a lot of times they can be inflexible because they're so attuned to getting the job done. That being said, they work harder. If you have a conscientious personality, you're going to get to work at 7:30. You're going to stay till 7:30 at night. The conscientious personality is the hardest working of the different traits. Bill Gates, for example, is a great example of the conscientious personality. And remember, he was a programmer. He's somebody who could spend many, many hours figuring out code. That's an excellent example. You're not going to get an extroverted programmer. If you have to concentrate, you have to look, you have to focus, you have to marshal your energies, you have to narrow your energies. Extroverts don't do that. That's why they go into sales. That's why your more conscientious personality tends to go into finance, accounting, engineering, that type of thing. Hillary Clinton is a conscientious personality. So is Bill Gates. The last type, the emotionally stable personality. Rational, objective, grounded, emotionally steady, level-headed under pressure. The emotionally stable personality does not allow their emotions to get the best of them. They're extremely grounded. I have a friend of mine who does all of the executive assessment work for NASA, the National Aeronautic and Space Administration, and he also does executive assessments to pick out fighter pilots. If somebody's carrying nuclear weapons, you want them to have a highly emotionally stable personality, trust me. And that's the number one personality structure that they look for. Airline pilots, for example, also physicians in emergency rooms. You want somebody who does not get swayed easily, and somebody who is able to handle stress without going bananas themselves. The weakness, they can be absolute, they can be overly judgmental, and they can be unconcerned with others' well-being. They're very metrically driven and very numbers driven. Modi, the Prime Minister of India, would be a good example of the emotionally stable personality. Warren Buffett is an emotionally stable personality. Barack Obama is an emotionally stable personality. And you've probably heard the term no drama Obama, right? Well, that's a manifestation of his emotional stability. And if you look at Obama and look at his leadership, have you ever seen him upset? Have you ever seen him lose his cool? No, not in 7 years. Despite all the pressure, despite all the stress, he is very emotionally stable. Now, sometimes people would say, well, he doesn't show enough emotion. He has plenty of emotion. It's just that he balances that emotion and doesn't project his energy out and keeps it more contained. So the emotionally stable personality is very, very good for decision making. And you can see how Warren Buffett is worth $55 billion. It's because he made very good investment decisions based upon what? Facts. Buffett doesn't invest based upon his emotion. He invests based upon hardcore, objective, rational facts. And that's what makes him such an outstanding investor. So now I've got a contest for you, or a little personal insight. I want you to take a piece of paper. And I want you to rank yourself. Put a 1 beside the trait that's most like you. Put a 2 beside the trait that's number 2, 3, 4, and 5. So put a 1 beside the personality factor you most closely identify with, and continuing numbering until each has a number. Rank your own Big 5. Lori, what do you got?
Well, I just wanted to say that in our sales training program, this piece is a very important part of Module 1. Salespeople often, don't spend a lot of time in an introspective state. So first, we want people to understand what their dominant traits are so that they can understand what their strengths are. Then what we do is we talk about how to leverage your strengths and how you can add strategic value through those strengths, and that's what we'll get into next. But the other important thing about this rank ordering, and we're not going to go into this in too much more detail except to talk about how you would add strategic value using your number 1 and 2 trait, but it's very important to understand your number 5 ranked trait. So that you understand where your weakness lies, and that you just do what you need to do to bring that weakness up to where it doesn't hurt you. We are not big believers in focusing on weaknesses and improving weaknesses just only to the extent that it doesn't hurt you, because we really believe that you want to focus on your strengths. Your strengths are where you're going to be most successful. And then the last thing that I'll add is once you understand where your strengths are and you understand and practice looking at these different personality traits, as a salesperson, what we go into in our second module, which we'll talk about, is how do you identify personality traits of other people and begin to use language that actually resonates with them, because each personality type is going to be motivated in different ways. And it's the salesperson's job to adapt to the person they're calling on, not the other way around. So we take this approach, which is very, very different than other sales training that you'll see in the market. But hopefully you've gotten a little bit of insight in doing this rank order exercise, and you can learn a lot more about the rank ordering and personality traits by obviously taking the course, but also looking at our test drive, which is on our website, which we'll talk a little bit about later.
I wanted just to mention, I wanted to piggyback what Lori just said, and it gets back to the concept of self-awareness. So often, the salesperson will project their personality on the selling dynamic. In other words, if you're an extrovert as a salesperson, a lot of times the extrovert, particularly in different types of staffing companies and different types of service companies, the extrovert salesperson will sell to an introvert. And it's very interesting because the extrovert will come in and tell the introvert or ask the introvert to go to a ball game with him or her, or to go out to dinner, or to go to some kind of mixer, because the extrovert thinks that that's great. But the introvert has really no inclination to want to do that. And the extrovert oftentimes doesn't understand why they're not connecting with their client or deeper, where they personalize it. Well, like, for example, I asked the person out 3 or 4 different times and they never wanted to go. They never wanted to go because they're an introvert, okay? And they have no interest. Remember, the extrovert always wants to expand their ecosystem. The introvert is really not particularly interested. So a lot of times, the extrovert will be selling to an introvert, or the open-minded personality will be selling to a conscientious, and you can make up all the different combinations. So one of the things that we have really found out, and this is why we start with self-awareness, and self-awareness is so important, you have to understand yourself so you don't project your personality. So I'm an extrovert. I'm an open-minded extrovert. I'll give you an example. One time, it took me about a year to get an appointment with a CEO. And finally, after all this rigmarole and working through HR, which is always difficult in the United States, I don't have to tell you that if you're on the line, we go back. Yeah, I'm an open-minded extrovert. So I finally got the appointment with the CEO. Guess what? And this was before we had done this program. This was about 6 or 7 years ago. And the CEO was an emotionally stable conscientious. So I sit down with him and had lunch, and I'm blabbing. I'm talking about the future. Open-minded types love to talk about the future, by the way. And so I'm being very extroverted. And as a general statement, the introverted male does not really like the extroverted male. And so I'm missing on all accounts, and I'm not realizing it because I'm talking about the future, and he wants to talk about metrics. I want to talk about creativity. He wants to talk about process. So I'm blowing this sale right and left. I don't even have to tell you how it ended. It did not end well. After a year of trying to develop this relationship, I blew it over one lunch. Now, I can honestly say now I would do it completely different after developing this program with my partner, Lori Blazek. So it's so important that your salespeople understand their natural core strength and how they rank themselves on the Big Five. And then in the program, we also teach them how to rank their client. And invariably, we find that people have that aha experience. No wonder why I couldn't get along with him or her, or no wonder why I didn't get that sale, or no wonder why we weren't aligned. It's not that people are bad people. It's just simply they are misaligned when it comes around to projecting their energy. Self-awareness is so important. So let's get into the idea of how you add strategic value. Now, if you're an open-minded, number one, you're going to add value through coming up with new and different ideas. Think about how you ranked yourself. If you ranked yourself number one, open-minded, you're going to add strategic value to deals with your creativity. If you're an extrovert, number one, you add value by expanding your network and connecting people. Extroverts are naturally connectors. They love to expand their ecosystem through connecting of people. So if you're an extrovert, you're going to add value to the deal by expanding your customers' network and connecting them to different partners and different business opportunities. The agreeable personality. You add value by creating harmonious working relationships and in dealing effectively with conflict. And each one of these is adding strategic value. The conscientious personality. You add value by improving processes and getting things done. The conscientious personality dots the I's, crosses the T's, and when they make a promise, believe me, it gets done when they say they're going to get something done. The emotionally stable personality, you add value through objective, critical analysis. Generally, the emotionally stable personality is very good with metrics and very good with data. So think about yourself for a moment. Reflect on yourself. And when we do live seminars, I often go out into the audience and talk to people and have them tell me what their rank order is, and then I do an interpretation of their personality, and invariably they have an aha experience. And I look like Merlin the magician, but that's really not true. All I'm using is good basic psychological theory, and by the time you get finished with Topline Talent, you're going to be able to do the same thing. You're going to understand how you add value. You're going to understand how your salespeople add value. You're going to understand your customers more effectively. And we've proven this time and time again. If you're going to be successful in life, and all of us want to be successful, you're going to be much more successful in life by leveraging your natural strength. You're not going to be successful by overcoming your weakness. We've studied successful people. And not just me, but my colleagues in the area of organizational psychology and personality psychology. We spent so many years in psychology trying to understand people's weakness and help them with weakness. If you have a performance appraisal, this is why I hate performance appraisals and you hate them too, because performance appraisals, for example, in most companies, what do? They focus on the weakness. Here's what you need to do to improve. That is exactly opposite. If you have performance appraisals, change your performance appraisal to focus on the person's strengths. Yeah, you can talk a little bit about the weaknesses, But the performance appraisal should be a celebration of strengths, not criticism for weaknesses. That's why a lot of major companies now are not using any kind of performance appraisals. We've had several large clients now that have completely disbanded performance appraisals for this very reason. Look at your number one trait and your number two trait. It's the fusion of that number one and number two is where your success is going to lie. Look at your fifth trait. You're going to see the shadow of your personality. You're going to see your weakness there. And our coaching advice to you is improve your weakness enough so it doesn't hurt your career. But as a professional psychologist, I'm just going to share this with you. Concentrate in life on improving your strengths. People ask me, how do I be a good parent? I've got 4 girls, and Lori and I have 4 girls. And the important thing you can do as a parent is help your child manifest their strengths. So the Topline Talent goals: gain confidence through leveraging your natural strengths, becoming a strategic partner and never a commodity vendor. Because you're going to be a commodity unless the salesperson adds strategic value to the deal, the client or the customer is going to see you as a commodity. So your salesperson has to add strategic value. So how do they add strategic value? They add strategic value through their strength. And each of your salespeople is going to add strategic value in a different way. Now, some of your salespeople, quite frankly, are not going to align with all the customers that they go after. They're going to capture the customers that they add strategic value. But at least your people are going to know how to resonate and how to communicate more effectively by using the language that most resonates with the customer. Lastly, the idea of collapsing time. You know, as a psychologist, I can tell you, we all improve and mature over time, but what we wanted to do with Topline Talent is, what if you could grow in 4 months in the time that normally it would take 10 years? In other words, are you better now than you were 10 years ago? The answer is yes, of course you are. But what if you could grow in 4 months as much as it would naturally take, as you would naturally grow over 10 years? So the idea of collapsing time, the idea of training is to collapse time. We want you to grow in 4 months as much as you would naturally grow in 10 years. How does it work? Lori, take it away.
Okay, we've structured this program so that it is 4 months. There's 4 modules. They're delivered in 28 lessons. And what's really important in terms of learning is the use of multimodalities. So you have an audio book, you have videos, you have interactive journaling, practice exercises, and our learning management system will download your inputs into your interactive journal into an ebook, which we ask people to reread at the end of the program, or at the end of module 3. So we have these multimodalities. The system is very easy to learn and operate. And what's nice about this is if you have salespeople all over the country or all over the globe, you can all be on this at the same time. So everyone gets the same great experience. Module 1 goes through, again, self-awareness, gaining confidence through using your natural strengths. Module 2 is 16 lessons as opposed to 8, so it takes probably about 6 weeks for this lesson as opposed to 4 for the first module. How to establish emotional resonance and trust. This is authenticity. This is really important. And subordinating your ego to improve listening skills and presentation skills. What you want to be able to do is add strategic value not just to people who are like you, but to understand how to communicate with people who are different than you. Module 3 is really for those extroverted salespeople who have difficulty with time management, saying no, aligning their activities with their goals. So that's module 3. And then module 4 is reinforcement for the salespeople. They will read the ebook with all of their journal entries embedded in it. And this is also, we think, very important that managers take Topline Talent along with their people in order to create a sales-driven culture. This is our best material on leadership and how to become a great coach. So that's module 4. And again, the the way that this program is structured is consistent with the science of how people learn and change behavior. The brain science is very clear now that 2-day sales training or any training of a complex skill really doesn't do any good. You have to burn new neural pathways in your brain, which takes a minimum of 3 to 4 months, optimally in short 20-minute chunks. We are the only sales training on the globe that is delivered in the method that really is consistent with how people change behavior.
I do want to just jump back, and I think one of the key things that we do with Topline Talent is teach your salespeople how to be great listeners. We believe that the salesperson who is the best listener is going to be the best salesperson. And one of the things we really do a great job on in Topline Talent is help your salespeople to not project their ego. That is such a critical lesson, and it's all in Module 2. And as Laurie said, it's consistent with brain science. We started out with great science. That was the basis of Topline Talent, is behavioral and brain science. And it turns out burning new neural pathways is, in fact, learning. All of you have been to 1 or 2-day training events. Guess what? You lose virtually 100% of what you learned in the first 30 days. So a 1 or 2-day sales training isn't worth the paper it's printed on. You might as well take the money and throw it away.
Okay, so how is Topline Talent most effective? These are things that we learned as we began to roll out our program in the U.S. and in India. It's very important. It's about 30 hours of training. So keeping the manager involved, optimally the manager would go through along with their sales team. We've had a lot of success where sales teams carve out a certain amount of time every week and study together. Also, we've got a client right now who's having weekly phone calls where people can dial in and talk about what they've learned. The accountability factor is also very important, whether it's reporting to a manager. Managers can, in fact, look at the progress of their people, but we really encourage people to take this program in a group and have accountability, which make sure that people stay on track to finish on time.
I'm just going to just simply say this. People don't want to change, and that's not necessarily bad because burning new neural pathways is a lot of work. You need team dynamics. So if you're going to use Topline Talent, you have to put the entire team through so that there'll be team dynamics and team accountability. We found that just 1 or 2 people going through it by themselves is not very good because people need the discipline that a team pushes forward. I just want to talk about Arun for a second. He was somebody that he took Topline Talent. He's, by the way, with a major consulting firm. He feels like it just totally transformed his life. We get this all the time, that Topline Talent does a lot more than just help a person become a better salesperson. It helps them become better people, better parents, better husbands, and better wives. So it really is a life transformational experience, and Arun is a great example of that in a guy that I really admire, and he grew so much by going through the program.
Well, now we're going to turn it over to Ali Hussein, who should be able to join us here as a presenter, just to tell you a little bit about his experience with the program, and then we'll wrap it up.
Ali.
Hello, everyone. And it's an absolute pleasure to be invited to this webinar. Thank you very much, George and Laurie, for an absolutely splendid presentation. I think I should start off by telling you a little bit about myself. And like any good story, it should start from the beginning. I've had 25 years of direct sales experience and a background which has been pretty much revolving around the sales and marketing industry. And like most salespeople, I stumbled into it as a teenager when I was working for my father in his business, and literally thrown into the deep end and expected to interact with clients. And sooner or later I realized that I sort of had a gift and an ability to speak to clients with confidence and enjoyed it, and sort of naturally drifted into the sales arena and started working in the corporate sector here in London for a number of companies, private sector as well as public sector. Now, as I'm sure any of you salespeople out there have experienced, the quest for any salesperson is to always meet their targets, get bigger contracts. And the challenge has always been, as a salesperson, is how to improve yourself. Now, along the way, I think I must have attended numerous sales courses and seminars, read numerous self-help books, whether it's Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar, or Anthony Robbins. The quest is always to learn more. But the challenge that I've always realized, that I can honestly say with my hand on my heart, is that once you've read the book, you've attended the course, applying those skills and techniques in your working environment straight afterwards, it's not that straightforward. As human beings, we're all creatures of habits. It's taken us many, many years to become who we are. For a book or a sales seminar to suddenly transform our behavioral attitude in a working environment, it's a very daunting task and also very unrealistic. Yet, as salespeople, we plow on, we carry on, and we use our actual sales meetings as our classroom, taking back any notes with us and saying, how can I tweak my improvements and increase my sales? But that's about really it. Now, the Holy Grail for any salesperson is to find out what that top salesman in the company or organization is doing. On numerous occasions I would have asked, how do you do it and what is your secret? And they would give you a very vague answer, but you simply couldn't nail it, what it is that made them stand out, what that 1 or 2 top % of salespeople were doing that I wasn't. And 1 year became 10 years, 10 years became 20, and 20 became 25. And you just simply hope that with your maturity, your sales figures would improve. Naturally, I was doing okay because after nearly 20 years, I set up my own private consultancy here in London. And it's doing okay. And naturally, I was always looking for ways to improve. I fortunately got introduced to both George and Laurie by a mutual acquaintance by the name of Mr. Sam Pitroda, who I'm sure you know was the former advisor to Prime Minister Singh in the Congress Party. And Sam, being a technocrat, but also a dynamic person who knows opportunities and can see where there's growth and strength in something, he introduced me to George and said, look, this is an interesting opportunity here in sales development. Naturally, my interest was piqued the moment he mentioned sales, but more importantly, I was being referred by a gentleman such as Sam Pitroda, whose background in business and telecoms is vast. So I thought, let's give a look into this. I had the opportunity to speak to George, and he said, look, try this course out. And I said, okay, fine. And naturally, I approached it with a great deal of skepticism because after having attended many seminars, attended many sort of traditional classroom settings, I just knew that this was probably going to be another one. And I thought, let's give it a shot and see how it goes. So I did the course over the course of 3 or 4 months. I took my time in doing it because that was very important. I didn't want to be rushed. But the most interesting thing was that the course was user-friendly. User-friendly in the sense that most salespeople are very busy people, and you've got to work around your schedule to fit in these type of things. So I was able to do the course in the comfort of my own time, at my own pace, and that was very, very important. But more importantly, I had someone holding my hand in the form of George, speaking in the background, telling me exactly where to go, how to do it. And that's really, really important because reading a book can be a very lonely experience, and attending a seminar for 24 hours or half a day, once again, not very productive. But when you have a tutor, a mentor looking over your shoulder, guiding you, instructing you, it's very, very useful. And not just once or twice, but over the course of 4 months. The real sort of USP for Topline Talent was that it suddenly managed to open up a completely new world for me as a salesperson. It was a blueprint, almost like someone had just handed me a blueprint on how to develop a meaningful skill. And really, quite frankly, it taught me how to optimally resonate and deeply communicate with other people that I was in a sales environment. But more than that, I think the program, it clearly outlined how personality type fits into the overall consultative sales process. I knew that I had strong qualities, being an extrovert, being a person who brought people together, but I just didn't know that I had those qualities and how I could utilize them. What the program did was certainly bring to my attention that these were the two skills or two personality traits that were very, very strong in me. How could I ramp it up 10 times to make it more effective for my clients or for my family or my friends? By doing that, I suddenly realized my emotional intelligence improved substantially. Now, the hallmark of emotional intelligence, as George mentioned earlier, is self-awareness, which involves not just knowing how you are, but also how other people perceive you. People with high emotional intelligence are masters of influence. They're skilled at altering their behavior to make the most of a given situation. Once I took this course, I was able to sit back in a meeting dynamic and not have to talk too much, but listen and study the clients. And this is probably one of the most important things about sales. Sales, if you want to be successful, 80% of sales is psychology, 20% is mechanics. So I trusted my instincts after doing this course that I didn't have to oversell, I didn't have to talk too much, but rather listen to my clients, show the confidence in my client that I knew exactly what he was saying, and then slowly structure a proposal, an idea that would be planted into their seed that will hopefully flourish into something that would add strategic value. So if I can say one thing about this course, it has substantially improved my emotional intelligence. And this course has provided me with the tools to really resonate, to connect with my fellow human beings, both in a social level, but also in a business dynamic environment. And it accelerated that process in just 4 months. And that's the most extraordinary thing here. Something that could have taken me many, many years to learn. I managed to have this aha moment in just 4 months period. And it has really, really been quite substantially an overall improvement using the latest scientific findings in neuroscience and behavioral psychology combined with utilizing the state-of-the-art technology that's delivered in this program. So after doing the course, I had to sort of speak to Sam, and I told him, thank you very much for the introduction. In fact, I was so impressed with the course, I asked George if I could potentially introduce this to my clients here in the UK. And I felt that there was definitely a gap here in the market, and I felt that there was an opportunity here to introduce UK clients and European clients to this very powerful, transformative course. So all I can say, George, is thank you very much for opening my eyes and improving my sort of entire sphere of influence when it comes to both personally but also from a commercial level.
Well, Ali, thank you. And I want to thank everybody for being with us tonight. And, you know, I think India produced one of the great salespeople of all time, Gandhi. Be congruent, be authentic, be your true self. Thank you so very, very much for being a part of Topline Talent's webinar.
For additional information, we would encourage you to go out on our website and watch the test drive. It's a 14-minute summary of the course, videos. It shows how the journal works. It'll give you an overview so that you can get a better feel for exactly how this program is delivered. If you have any questions, you can reach us in the United States at info@toplinetalent.com, and if you have any questions for those of you in the UK, feel free to reach out to Ali at toplinetalent.com, and we would be happy to set up conference calls, Skype calls, whatever is necessary to answer any questions that you have, and we very much appreciate you being on the line today.
Thank you so very much. Good luck, and we hope to hear from each one of you. Good night and good afternoon.
We have a question from Mr. Karthi Sampath. What, according to you, is a best behavioral approach for a cold call when you have no idea who you are dealing with?
The best behavioral approach is what Gandhi said, authenticity and genuineness. Now, we recommend that you do your homework and that you understand the client before you make that cold call. We really don't like cold calls where you have no idea who you're dealing with. But if you're going to do that, the one thing that research has pointed out, people recognize authenticity. People recognize genuineness. And if you have that in your voice, if your behavior correlates with your voice, you're going to come across in a way that's authentic. So the most important thing you can do is be authentic.
And I'll just add, we just came off a day of 6 meetings here in New Delhi, and we had never met any of these people. But in advance of each meeting, we looked up the company, we looked up the person as best we could on LinkedIn. You know, social media is an amazing tool. We were able to determine, you know, background, education, at least to the extent that we had some sense for who the person was, so that when we went into these initial calls, we were able to ask open-ended questions to get the client engaged, so that they felt comfortable with us. And I can say that every person seemed to be impressed that we knew a little something about them. So, you know, that's the beauty of the internet, being able to find out at least something about the person, or if not the person specifically, about the company that they work for and what their, you know, mission statement is, or, you know, objectives are. So, you know, cold calling is very, very difficult, but, you know, we do touch on this definitely in the program.
Thank you so much, Dr. Watts and Ms. Laurie. That was clearly very important and useful insights which you have actually explained to the participants about the personality traits that can be identified and leveraged for succeeding in any endeavor in your life. So I hope all our participants have also been have absorbed that and they have understood. And if there are any queries or any clarifications that you may seek, you have the email ID, or you can also write to me directly at ds.rao@cii.in, and I would be glad to offer our clarifications through Dr. Watts and Ms. Lam. So thank you very much for being with us and participating actively in the interaction, and have a nice day. We are concluding the session here.